We must be on a granny square kick around here because I have another granny square-ish video for you this week. You're joining them as you go, and it feels like you're crocheting. It doesn't feel like you're joining squares at all. I can't believe I haven't finished a project with this join before. So if you have been sleeping on the join as you go method, you've got to stick around because I think this join has a potential to change the way that you think about granny squares or just square projects in general. I just want to share that with you today. Now, would I say I am a pro at join as you go granny square? No, totally not. There's a handful of different ways you can join as you go. I tried a lot of them, but I really settled on this one as being the good balance between easy and looks good. I like the way that it has a little bit of texture on the join, so it's slightly raised from the granny square. I think that looks really pretty. So yeah, I have a few more squares that I can work with to show you how I'm doing this join. But we're going to use a different color because if you haven't noticed, I love using cream and pastel colors, but they're not always super friendly on camera. This one also might be a little too light. So we'll use the blue to join these squares together for now. In case you're wondering, this is colonial blue. I think it's a really pretty color. It's also the darker blue in these squares. But essentially what you'll do on your first square is continue as if you're crocheting a regular granny square, but you're only finishing 3 sides, if that makes sense. So the one thing that I do different here than when I'm crocheting like the next round of a granny square is when I join to my corner, I did create a chain there just so that I have everything kind of attached. But instead of chaining 2 or 3 or whatever for the corner, I'm just gonna jump right into it. So it's more of a standing stitch kind of than anything. I'm just wrapping the yarn and making a double crochet, and that's all there is to it. But otherwise, the stitch pattern is basically the same. I want 3 double crochets in this corner, and that will be the start of the corner pattern. So we still have the 3 and the 3, but we'll finish this other 3 when we finish this side of the granny square, which actually comes way later in the project. So make your 3 groups of, not your 3 groups, your 3 double crochet, your 1 group of 3 double crochet. It's been one of those mornings, let me tell you. It'll be really interesting to see how this join looks in this other color. I'm honestly not sure if I'm gonna like it because it's right there. I don't know, we'll see. I really like the cream color on that one. Now, the one thing I have realized with join as you go, it's really important that you understand what needs to happen, and that will help you know what to do next, if that makes sense. So I like to situate my granny square so my join is in the bottom right corner of the project. Now, of course, if you're left-handed, it'll be the bottom left corner, but you get the idea. This will be the side edge of your project. So the side of my blanket would be right here. We will have another square added here. We'll have another square here. And this will be the bottom edge, which we'll actually finish up later. So we don't need to do anything here. We just have the 3 sides crocheted, and we haven't done anything with the corner because this is where it gets a little bit fun and interesting. Instead of finishing the corner like we did up here and here, you'll just crochet 3. So like half of the corner. The easiest way I found to do this is, first of all, with your last double crochet finished, you will join with the slip stitch to any corner, whichever one you want to be your bottom corner. of your next square. And that will be the first step to get it in place. And then the easiest thing that I found to keep this straight so I'm crocheting in the right parts is to fold it up like this and work like this. And I can crochet on this one, but still have access to this one because we will need to join as we crochet this side here. Instead of chaining any number at all, I'm still just making my double crochet. So kind of doing a funky, weird standing crochet stitch, just like that. You really just yarn over and work the double crochet, and it will all make sense and look a little bit better in the long run. So you can trust me on that one, or you could do your regular double crochet. Totally up to you. So get your 3 in your corner here, and then you can go back to your original granny square. Find your first gap space, which if you have a chain there, it'll be like your first chain 1 space. But I do my granny squares a little bit different and I omit that chain. So it's really just the space between the first 2 clusters. You'll slip stitch there. And then you're done with that back square for a minute. Then you'll find your next 2 and you'll work a cluster of 3 double crochets in there. So we've got this, 2 clusters side by side, nothing different except for the fact that you got a slip stitch back there. So you finish that one, you'll jump back to the first square and slip stitch in that space. And then work your next 3 double crochets. So that's the trend. And honestly, that's pretty much all you do the whole time. There's a couple of nuances that I want to show you too. But essentially, that's the skill. 3 double crochets on the new one, slip stitch to the last one. And it still just feels like I'm crocheting a granny square. Do you know what I mean? When you join squares with your hook in other ways, it sort of feels like a finishing technique even though you're using your crochet hook. And this way, I don't know. I don't know if what I'm trying to say makes any sense at all, but it's just different. That's all I can say. It's different, but in a good way. Now the one thing I noticed, you kind of get to the end here and you sort of panic because you think you did something wrong because it looks like it's off by like 1 group, but it totally works out in the long run. So you finish your cluster here, you have your slip stitch to your last little space there, no problem, and then you'll 3 double crochet in your chain 2 space of the new corner. There we go, and then slip stitch in the corner space of your first granny square. And that's what your join will look like. See, I really like this version because it gives you kind of a raised, bumpy-ish texture and it looks pretty. I kind of like this darker blue. I really wasn't sure if I would like it because that same color is right there. So this kind of looks, I don't know. It's probably not my favorite, but we're gonna go with it anyways so you can see what I'm doing. So one thing to keep in mind about the join as you go, when you're on your first row, like your first row of granny squares and you're joining them together, you only have 1 join edge. That's what I'll call this. Just kind of making that up as I go. And you'll have 2 normal crochet edges. The one thing that I like to do in the corner here to sort of set things up so it looks neater, I do a chain and then I just jump right into my 3 double crochets to finish off this corner. So it looks like this. And then just crochet this side and this side as you normally would. I already had this blanket in the works, so that's why I'm turning these squares into a blanket. But the last video that I made where we did the granny square canvas bags, this join would work really well for that too. So if you want a smaller project and you still want to try this join, or if you have been wanting to make one of those bags, I think this join would work really well. I'll link that video below in case you haven't seen it yet. It was a lot of fun. If you haven't seen it yet, definitely do. It was a very, I don't know, it was one of those projects that took me by surprise. It worked a lot better than I thought it would. So on the first granny square of your first row, you crochet 3 sides like normal. And then to add in your second square, you have a join row and you have 2 sides that are normal. You'll do that as many squares as you need until you get to the last one, which is the one that we'll add here. When you're joining the last square, this row here isn't different at all. You'll still work your slip stitch in the corner there. So here's what things look like now. I'm at the end of my join side here. The last thing I'll do, of course, is slip stitch to the corner on this square here to finish it off. But let's think about the join in a way that makes a little more sense, at least for me, to wrap my head around. No matter how many squares you're joining in your first row, think of it this way. You have your starting square, you have your middle square or squares, and then you have your last square. Because they're all crocheted just slightly different. The first one, remember, we had 3 normal sides. That'll always be the case for your first granny square. And then for the middle squares, we have 1 join and 2 normal sides. And now for the last square, we have 1 join and 1 normal side. And then we'll jump up to the next row here. So this corner I treat the same as this corner. I make my first chain 1, or my only chain 1 rather, and work my 3 double crochets. Again, experiment with these corners. I don't really think there's a true right and wrong way. Just do what looks good to you. I think this looks pretty okay. See, when you do it that way, it still looks like a normal corner to me. There's another way to join as you go. I've actually tried it and experimented with it in the past, and I think it's probably why I never really finished a project with this join, because you can join as you go, kind of like this, but you're still cutting the yarn after joining every single square. And to me, that just felt like I'm doing a join in every other way. I'm creating extra ends to have to weave in, and whoops, I just messed that stitch up. But I don't know, you know what I mean? Like when you're cutting the yarn as you're joining as you go in that particular way, it just feels like every other join. And I think if I can justify myself in any way as to why I haven't tried this yet or finished a project with it yet, I think it's because I started with that join as you go, and it just felt like any other join to me. I don't know. And that's all there is to crocheting the last square in your join. So before we crocheted, or we added squares from right to left, now we're going to go up and go from left to right. Now, of course, if you're left-handed, reverse all of that. Join with a slip stitch to your corner to attach the new square, and then just get it all in your hands so it's easy for you to crochet. For me, what that looks like is fold it in half, but then of course I need to flip it. That way I can crochet on the new granny square, but still have access to this one back here for my slip stitches. So then when you're ready to add in the second square of your second row, the best way that I have found to do that so far, at least, is to slip stitch with the opposite corner. And that would be this one right here as well. So we made a slip stitch in this corner, we made a slip stitch over in this corner, and that just makes everything look a little cleaner and not have little holes where 4 squares come together. And then go right into your 3 double crochets for this corner here. So just wrap the yarn. It feels really wonky and weird just for that first stitch, but then, you know, it gets much easier after that. And then you can fold everything up, join with your slip stitch to that back granny square, and continue the join just as you've done before. A little repetition never hurt anybody, right? So we'll look at this corner one more time, because I'll tell you what, I had to work and rework this section of the pattern a few times before it finally sunk in what I actually needed to do. So I like to join with the slip stitch to this square first, and then join with a slip stitch to this next corner over. And that'll get you set up to add your next square. And now, everything else is the same. The main thing you need to look out for is where you're joining with a slip stitch to the back part and where your corners are coming together. I'd say out of everything, if you're going to do something wrong at this stage, it'll probably be that maybe you got shifted over one and they're not lining up exactly. But the good thing about that is if it does happen, you will notice it right away. It sticks out like a sore thumb. It's not like I know that from experience or anything. That is really all there is to attaching the second row of granny squares. So it doesn't matter how many squares you have in your project, you'll continue adding them along just like that. Remember back to the first square that we did. We had 3 normal crochet sides, and then from there we had a couple of normal sides and a couple of join sections, and that's how this first row came together. Well, the second row, now at this point that they're already joined, isn't a whole lot different than that. The first square of your second row, or your third row or fourth row, or any after that, you'll have 3 normal rows. And since my hook is right here, we can just move right into that. I'll crochet along this edge, and this edge, just like normal, as if I were adding a normal granny square round. And then we'll kind of double back and do our join rows. I do like to add a chain right there to keep it a little bit more tidy, and then go straight into my double crochets of the corner here. And then you already know how to do this. Just double crochet in the spaces between the previous clusters. But for this join in particular, I would say it's less important to memorize step by step what needs to happen, because I mean, there's kind of a lot going on here. It's not overly complicated, but if you were to try to memorize step by step everything that needs to happen, you'd probably never use this in a project. And that's not what I want for you, because yeah, I think it does take a minute to learn what's going on and what needs to happen, but it's doable. It's totally doable, and I don't think you have to have a ton of experience in order to be able to finish a project. Try and fail. I think you'll find more success that way, and I think you'll learn this technique more. But don't try it just once. if you can come up with maybe, I don't know, 2 little projects, something that you can finish maybe in a weekend, you should have a good enough understanding of how to join as you go. So yeah, when you get that last 3 double crochet little group there, then we need to join with like the other corners so that it doesn't have a hole in the corner where you don't actually want a hole to be. And you know, I'm still kind of working my way through this and figuring out what approach I like the best. But so far, what I have found looks the best, at least to me, is to join with the square that's directly across, I guess, not directly across. It's diagonal. There's the word. Join with the granny square that's diagonal in the chain 2 space with a slip stitch, and that'll keep it nice and tidy for now. So then we have our 3 sides that are crocheted. This granny square is technically done. First of all, I'm going to chain 1 just to get my yarn in the right place, and then we can add a join row right here. So the idea for crocheting the second row now, once you have all of your initial joins and you have your first square, the 3 normal rounds, sides, not rounds, then you'll have a join side and then 2 normal sides. But just in case you need sort of a refresher, from here, I just jump right into my 3 double crochets on the new square in the corner. It really makes a big difference to have everything folded in front of you. And then join with the square behind. And yeah, the join is the same. I would say out of everything, the one thing that you will easily memorize is the join rows here. And then you just have to refresh your memory every now and then, sometimes by trial and error, how to handle the corners and which squares need a regular side worked and which ones need a join side. All of that will come with experience and practice. Join finished on that side, chain 1, 3 double crochets, and work this side like normal and this side like normal. If you're finding this video before you have ever tried to crochet a granny square, then you know this probably wouldn't be the join that I would recommend you try first because there are some little quirks and nuances to it. But I don't want that to scare you away from crocheting granny squares because there are other ways that you can join them. And they're really neat and interesting ways as well. You can create some really cool textures or like no texture at all with some of the joins. I do have a video that has 5 of my favorite joins for granny squares, although I'm probably gonna have to redo that video at some point and add this join to that list because I really do like it. But yeah, that would be where I would send you, actually second. So first, if you've never crocheted a granny square before, I would send you to my granny square video. It's a pretty slow, easy to follow, step-by-step tutorial on how to crochet a granny square, or how I crochet a granny square. You know, there are a couple of different ways that you can do it, and I have, I don't know, kind of refined the way I crochet them so that they look a little bit neater. So all of that is included in that video. Just like we did on the last corner, we'll do the same thing here. Nothing has changed. 3 double crochets to finish off this corner here. And then again, join with a slip stitch to this corner. Make your chain 1 and then just rotate everything around so that you can crochet this last join here. So then the last thing that we'll do to finish up the second row of granny squares is crochet along this side here. Don't forget the chain there so it looks a little bit neater. I find that if I skip that chain, it doesn't really look like the rest of the corners, so that's why I do it. But you know, experiment and see what you like the best. Maybe you want 2 chains there, maybe you want no chains there. Whatever works for you. Now, theoretically, that's everything you need to know about join as you go. If you wanted to add a 3rd row of granny squares, you would start the same way that we did here with the 2nd row. The way you would finish your join as you go project is, of course, and it actually works out really well that these 2 yarns are very different colors, we can easily see the raw edge now that needs to be fixed. So we need to have blue around everything, and that means we have this side edge here that needs just traditional granny squares worked, and then we have this bottom edge. And so that's what we'll do to finish it. So I've got myself here in the corner. We'll chain 1. You could chain 2 technically. I'm experimenting right now with 1 chain for some reason. I think it might look a little bit better for my attention, at least personally. And then we'll crochet this side like normal. Now when you get to the point where you've reached where 2 granny squares are joined, there's something a little bit fiddly you have to do here. And that's because we have half of our corner stitches worked here and half of our corner stitches worked there, but we don't want it to look like it's half done, if that makes sense. So what I like to do is work 3 double crochets in the corner here. That's going to finish the stitches that need to be here in order for this corner to look like it's finished. It's been a long day. And then join with a slip stitch right here, just right in this space. And when you do that, you can't even tell that that's not a real corner that you crocheted when you were working the entire granny square. And then chain 1. That'll kind of start to make this corner look like it was done with the rest of the granny square, and then make 3 double crochets here in this corner space. And see, when you handle it like that, it looks pretty good. I think we could do a little bit of blocking and make this look a little bit better, but we're pretty darn close for this join. Isn't it so cool how you can completely change the look of your project just by your join yarn? This cream version, I think this is the one that I'm actually going to use for my blanket because I really like how light this color looks versus having the darker blue. I could go with the tan color as well, but that would look completely different too. I don't know. I think it's super cool how you can just change one thing in your project and you just get a completely different result. Now don't worry if you've watched all of this and you're thinking to yourself, there's no way I can figure this out. You can definitely figure this out, but it's one of those things that has to come from practice. You have to try, you have to fail and mess up a couple of times. So if you have a little stack of granny squares sitting around, maybe you have 6 of them that are smaller than the granny squares that I was working with today, you could put all 6 of those together and make a really cute placemat for your kitchen. I have the step-by-step guide for Join As You Go. It has more information, of course, some step-by-step pictures and all of that. I think you'll find that really helpful as well to kind of supplement with this video. I'll have that linked in the description as well. The pattern and the video for how to crochet a granny square, I will include that in the description. So you should have all of the resources that you need to make your squares and try this join. Now all of those resources you can find completely free on my website and the videos here on the channel. But if you do want to support the channel and my work with B.Hooked, B.Hooked.com is our shop for all of our PDF patterns. We have some PDF pattern bundles and some t-shirts. I'll have that linked in the description below. Thank you so much for your support and for watching and for joining me today and joining with me as we go. That was a really bad one. Happy hooking, and I'll see you in the next one.